It looks like Rachel Zegler's career is heading downhill, and it's mostly her own doing. The live-action Snow White was supposed to skyrocket her stardom, but instead, Hollywood seems to be turning its back on her. The trouble started way back in June 2021, when Disney announced Rachel as the new Snow White. Immediately, the internet began to buzz, not all of it positively. Many questioned the casting choice, pointing out that the original Snow White was described as having skin as white as snow.
This is not, needless to say, the original story behind Snow White's name. In the original fairy tale, she is named Snow White because she has white skin. That is what the name refers to. She has skin as white as snow. That's why she's named Snow White.
Rachel, proudly representing her Latina heritage, fired back at critics. She reminded everyone that Snow White was a global fairy tale, beloved in many cultures, including Spanish-speaking countries. But the plot thickened. In August 2023, it was revealed that another Latina actress, Renata Vaca, had also been a finalist for the role. According to Renata, the casting call wasn't limited by ethnicity. Disney simply wanted someone who could sing like a true Disney princess. Rachel had won that race. Then, in October 2024, Rachel revealed a twist. Her Snow White wasn't named for her looks, but after surviving a snowstorm with her parents, drawing from a lesser-known version of the fairy tale. But things took a darker turn when Rachel criticized the original Snow White film. She slammed it as outdated and criticized the idea of Snow White waiting around for a prince to save her. At the D23 Expo in 2022, she said the original film came out in 1937, and it shows.
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true.
Rachel even joked that the prince in the original film seemed more like a stalker than a love interest.
Focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
She revealed that in the new version, they scrapped the love story entirely. Even though Andrew Burnap was cast as the male lead, Rachel joked, maybe all his scenes get cut. It's Hollywood, baby. The internet exploded. Some applauded her for modernizing the story, but others were furious, accusing her of forcing a girl boss narrative into a classic fairy tale.
The amount of, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Leave it the f alone. Yeah, that's it. If it ain't broke, break it. Leave these stories alone. By the way, if she never opened her mouth and she didn't do all this nonsense, people would have gone and watched the movie. They would have made their money, but then people would have been disappointed after the match.
Branding experts soon weighed in. One strategist, Ashton Stein, criticized Rachel for lacking proper media training during her promo tour. But the real twist came when David Hand, the son of one of the original Snow White directors, called the remake insulting. He said Walt Disney and his father would be rolling in their graves. The backlash was fuel for conservative media, especially the Daily Wire, who announced their own Snow White remake titled Snow White and the Evil Queen, starring Brett Cooper. It was set to release in 2025. However, Brett left the network in December 2024, and the project disappeared. Meanwhile, Rachel spoke again in an October 2024 interview with Variety, saying her words had been taken out of context. She insisted that romance is part of the story, just not the main plot, and admitted that some of her jokes didn't land as intended. But by then, the damage was done.
What really shocks me about this story, Disney and all these media companies, they invest hundreds of millions of dollars into these projects, right? Have they ever thought about maybe a little bit of vulnerability study, opposition research, that sort of thing before you go and hire some Zoomer who's a lunatic?
Military and openly supports Israel. Things got more intense when people found out Rachel Zegler had publicly shown support for Palestine. Now, the lead heroine and the villain were standing on opposite sides of a global conflict. Social media erupted. Hashtags flew. The controversy even led to death threats against Gal Gadot, forcing Disney to boost her security. Surprisingly, though, on set, Rachel and Gal got along just fine. They appeared appeared together at the premiere without any visible tension, proving real-life professionalism can exist even when the internet spins a different story. But this wasn't the only boycott. After the 2024 US presidential election, Rachel posted a strong anti-Trump message, Donald Trump, followed by a not-so-subtle wish that his supporters never know peace. Predictably, conservative audiences called for yet another boycott of the film.
When you come out and the freedom of speech was to condemn the very thing that you're paid to build? Are you kidding me?
Seeing how quickly things escalated, Rachel issued an apology. She said she never meant to offend anyone and tried to clarify her stance. But the internet doesn't forget. Her reputation had already taken a hit.
I want it to come off as me being ungrateful for the opportunities I have. I can also be having the greatest time and simultaneously wishing people would stop sending me death.
Meanwhile, another controversy had been bubbling since January 2022, this one about the dwarfs. Actor Peter Dinklage criticized Disney's decision to reboot Snow White, calling it a step backward. In response, Disney promised a more inclusive take and said they were consulting the dwarfism community. But in July 2023, leaked set photos told a different story. Only one actor with dwarfism was cast, Martin Kleba, while the rest were a diverse group of average-sized men and women. This move sparked intense backlash. Critics accused Disney of erasing opportunities for actors with dwarfism in their effort to appear politically correct. Actors like Jason Weeman, Acuna, and Dylan Hornswoggle-Possel called Disney out. Dylan even blamed Peter Dinklage, suggesting his comments might have cost others their roles.
And with Disney, you know the famous phrase, go woke, go broke? Right now, Disney, their big blockbuster movie has plummeted.
Then in October 2023, Disney gave the public its first official look at the Seven Dwarfs, and surprise, they were entirely CGI. Modeled after the original 1937 designs, the characters were animated, not live action. What stung even more? Disney never referred to them as dwarfs in any promotional material, just by their individual names, Doc, Bashful, Grumpy, and so on. After all the talk of reimagining and inclusion, it felt like Disney had taken the easiest way out. When the movie finally released, the reception was brutal. On Rotten Tomatoes, only 40% of 247 critics gave it a positive score. The average rating? A lukewarm May 2nd, 10. Metacritic wasn't any better, 50 out of 100 from 51 reviews. Critics couldn't decide if the film was a bold reimagining or just a confused mess. Nicholas Barber, BBC, said the tone was inconsistent, but oddly fascinating. Dan Rubin, Slant, dismissed it as a paint-by-numbers modernization. Amy Nicholson, LA Times, called it a case study in media contradictions. Neil Minow, RogerEbert.com, felt it lacked the sweetness and imagination of the original. And then came the harsher reviews. Peter Bradshaw, The Guardian, described it as exhaustingly awful. Johnny Oleksinski, New York Post, called it lifeless and forgettable. Tyler Tynes, discussing film, said Rachel carried the film, but everything else was a disaster. David Fear, Rolling Stone, summed it up best. It may not be the worst live-action Disney film, but it was definitely close to being the blandest. In the end, Snow White's downfall wasn't just about a bad movie. It became a symbol of how modern storytelling, politics, and internet outrage can collide, and Rachel Zegler's career got caught right in the middle.